Alright, welcome back everyone to Jface Games. And today I'm going to be rambling a little bit and maybe doing a little designing. Today's off the cuff in this video. The rambling will probably be about Dragonbane first, because I've been playing Dragonbane in a campaign, using the campaign that comes in the box. And we're about 4 sessions in, and so I feel like I've gotten the grasp, a different level of a grasp on the combat than I did before. And I'll tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and the in-between, I guess. So let's start with that, right? So, Dragonbane combat. What's been cool? I can tell you that I think that I'm currently enamored with the idea of attacks just being a skill check, and that skill check being pretty good, right? And then your damage after the fact. So one of the things I really like about Dragonbane, and Vagabond does this too, but Vagabond's a roll over and this is a roll under, is that you might have a character whose, blade skill is like 14, right? And that means that if I roll a 14 or lower on a d20, I successfully hit. And it's just very fast. The combat becomes very fast, and you don't miss a lot, which feels good. Now, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to just destroy everything. Everything has pretty low hit points in this game. I think that the party just faced a orc chieftain of sorts who had only 24 hit points. I mean, you compare that to some of the damage you can do. So there's a knight in the group who was wielding a long spear, and the long spear itself did 2d8, and then because of their strength, they did a d6 extra. So a creature only has 24 hit points, and you're doing 2d8 plus a d6. That's a lot of damage, right? You'd think that you'd be able to crush that. But what this game does, which is kind of cool, is that there are different abilities. So let's go ahead and pull up the rules. There are different abilities that these sort of like chiefs or these main NPCs, these bosses, will have. And they'll have heroic abilities. I don't think I realized this, how good these heroic abilities are, until I started playing, right? Because the players, they've only got one heroic ability, right? Pretty much. And they don't get another heroic ability until they do something, in essence, sort of heroic, or they get a skill up to 18, which is not easy, and it's not fast, right? But these heroic abilities are amazing, and these bosses, these NPC bosses, they'll have like 2 or 3 of these things. So this boss that they were fighting, in essence, had this defensive ability, right? And what this meant is that they could attempt to parry an attack without consuming their action for the round, right? And this bonus parry can be used anytime during the round, and you may only try to parry the same attack once. But this means they can parry as many attacks as they want. The problem is that they're using up willpower. And so this made it very interesting and dynamic in the fight, where I don't think the players have realized what this means in terms of tactics yet. But they were fighting this orc chieftain, and the orc chieftain had I think they had 14 willpower, right? And the duelist defensive ability is 3 willpower to use, right? So they're going to be able, this person is going to be able to attempt to parry, I think they had 16 willpower, right? I think it was 16. So regardless, this means they're going to be able to get 5 parries in addition to being able to still attack, right? And so the players weren't doing a good job of focus firing, right? Because this orc chieftain had 2 other bodyguards there with him, right? And so, or with her, it was a female orc chieftain. And so the orc chieftain has got these 2 bodyguards, and they're dealing with other players, and the players do this. And meanwhile, 2 characters are trying to attack this orc chieftain, and she's just ping, ping, parrying these things, because her skill in blades was like 16, right? And so she uses that to actually parry as well, and she hits hard. So that was really cool. So first off, the thing I realized is how amazing these heroic abilities are, and how they are going to change the battlefield to a degree, right? So if the players, we had 4 in the campaign that day. There's 6 in the party, but there's 4 that were playing that day. If they had all attacked this chieftain at the same time, now the chieftain's got to make decisions. Okay, I'm going to try and parry this one and this one because they look like big threats. I'm going to let these 2 go through, and hopefully I don't get hit. so that she doesn't just burn off all of her willpower in one go, right? But they've got to realize that. And I was giving what's the word? I was kind of describing the chieftain as being like getting more fatigued or looking very winded, to give them an idea of like what's her willpower potentially at the moment, right? So that was really cool. And so when you can make your own NPCs for the party to go against, but you have to be very judicious about which of these heroic abilities you're going to combine, because some of them are disgustingly good. They're very good. Like the rogue, for instance, has this backstab, and the thing about backstabbing is that it can't be dodged or parried. So they got in there, and it couldn't be parried by this chieftain, but the chieftain just knocked that person out as soon as they recognized it. So I was using good tactics with them. The other thing that's interesting is positioning. So I'm going to just go through a little bit of positioning, because there's a couple interesting things in this game in terms of positioning, right? And I think this leaves some interpretation to the players to some degree, is that there's this concept of movement where it will say specifically that you can't move past an enemy, right? So in other words, this goblin, if they wanted to try and attack this person over here, they couldn't move into these squares. And say this person had a long spear, then that means they have a range up to here. That means this goblin couldn't move here and continue to move. Nor, if they stopped here, could they move further next turn. There was this interesting sort of language there where it's like, if someone doesn't want you to go past them, you can't go past them. You would have to knock this character down, so they're prone, in order to get past them. So now positioning becomes much more vital, because you've got these backline characters that might be able to just sit back there and be defended, right? And armor, there's only one character in the party currently who has full plate. It's a knight. Armor's huge. They have like 9 damage reduction, right? So a goblin, if they're fighting a goblin, which they have, does a d10 plus a d4 damage with like a short bow. But with their melee weapons, they just do a d10 damage. And if you've got 9 damage reduction, the goblins aren't going to do anything. And we realized that. The goblins did nothing against this character when he was able to engage them in melee and make it so they couldn't like get distance, right? And so now this position, I think, matters. But it's really cool because it doesn't feel like a tactical weight. Like, it doesn't feel like there's so much tactical depth in all these like chunky rules. It's these very subtle small rules. We already talked about the initiative order, how you can switch with someone else, right? And then this rule, someone can't go past you. Now, granted, there's the question of like, how do you determine going past at your table? Like, is there a facing? Is there this, that? I mean, I think that we've pretty much said like, this character says, this is my line, right? Like, this is my axis. They can't go past this. And so now they can come in here and they can move around this axis, but they can't go past. The other thing is, anytime someone tries to leave your range, if they want to move out, they have to make an evasion attempt. And that evasion attempt is to make sure they're not getting an attack of opportunities. They call it a free attack in this game, but it's in essence, they have to evade to make sure they can get away from you so they don't get hit. And whatever that attack is, they can't parry. So now, if they try and move away from you, they're making their evasion already sort of like preamble. And if the attack comes through, they can't parry it or get out of the way. And so that makes things. Now, granted, this is only for NPCs and players. Monsters don't follow these rules. Monsters can run past anybody. Monsters can, at least that's my interpretation of the rules. Monsters can run past anyone. Monsters can move in and out of range from you. You can't move in and out of range from them, but they can move in and out of range from you, no problem. And so it makes it very interesting, right? These are some of the things that we've already seen in gameplay that have been, I think, kind of fascinating, right? This also brings in, I'm going to pull up a chart back here that I have. These are some of the things that are potential actions that we're now realizing, or my players are now realizing, oh, these matter a lot. So you only have the one action in the game, and a lot of times it feels like you're trying to save it to evade or parry because you can get hit hard, right? And so what are some things you can do? Well, you can try and shove someone. Shoving is sort of like this auto thing that happens. Pretty much if you have a better strength bonus and damage, than the opponent, then if you hit them with a melee attack, you can automatically choose to move them, right? So it's like this guy has... Goblins don't have a plus damage for melee, but our knight has his strength is like 17, so he gets a plus d6. So if he hit this goblin, he could automatically move the goblin away. That matters because, say this guy's back here, and this guy he wants to be able to run over here to attack this goblin, but he can't get past, say there's a wall here, right? Like say there's a barrier. This goblin can choose not to let him pass, but this is a caster. So now this guy's going to say, you know what, I'm going to slam this. So they hit this guy hard and they shove him, and so now this guy can make a beeline or whatever it is, however it's going to play out. So that's interesting, right? That makes it interesting in terms of how that shove matters. Grapple, that's pretty much, you're just going to be grabbing the person. Find weak spots important because damage resistance in this game can be pretty freaking good, right? I already told you about that plate mail character. So now I'm going to be using this with my goblin. My goblin is going to make a bane attack. We roll twice and take the lower to try and find a creak in that armor so that there's no armor reduction, right? That's going to be huge for me as a DM when this guy's like surrounded by goblins and just laughing, which happened in the last session. But now I've got a little trick. He's going to be in trouble. What else? Disarm, you throw away their weapon. Find weak spot, that we already talked about that one. Topple, this is cool. So here we go. Topple is you are going to try to use your skill of a weapon, so your blade skill, versus their evade, right? So it's an opposition roll, and if you succeed, you're going to knock them down on the ground. And why does that matter? And if you have a weapon that has topple, meaning I think like a warhammer is good at toppling someone, then you get a boon on your skill check. Well, if you can knock someone down, you get a boon on all attacks plus a d6 damage. And this damage, the damage matters in this game, right? If you can burn something down quick, great, right? So that's really cool. That's a really cool concept. So I have a feeling my players are going to start to try and topple and then attack these prone individuals and try and pull that off. The other thing that they weren't using initially, but has played out to be really important, is that whenever you take a parry action or a dodge action, you get free movement. So if you dodge someone, you get to move a space for free, right? If you parry someone, you get to move them and yourself. So now, once again, we have this scenario where it's like this guy's back here and this guy's over here. The goblin's going first. The goblin actually hits. This guy has a choice. This goblin just hit me. He is using a piercing attack or whatever it's called. Like he's finding a weak spot, so I know it's going to hurt. You know what? I'm going to parry. Why I'm going to parry is because I'm really good with my blade, so no big deal. But I'm going to parry, and then when he parries, he's going to move this goblin here and move himself like here or something, right? So he parries, he repositions both of them, and now this guy can run past over here and get to this guy, right? So I think those kind of things are very clever in the design, even though the design is still very simplistic and smooth, right? And the other thing here that I haven't really gotten into, we didn't use this, but now I'm going to start to use it, is that your damage type matters, right? So if someone is wearing studded leather and you, I forget what this is, leather or studded leather, gets a +2 against bludgeoning weapons. So you get +2 armor reduction against bludgeoning, and then chainmail gets +2 against slashing. So the weapon type matters based on, I just like that because I want my players to switch weapons. I just think it's cool. I think it's a problem-solving game, right? Where you're like, oh, and also they do massive damage sometimes, and so being able to get a little extra damage reduction and then describe it to the players will be kind of cool, right? So those are some of the cool little Dragonbane things. Terrain, we don't need to talk about that. But what's the other thing that's interesting? The other thing I find interesting that I still haven't gotten my head around just yet is healing. So in this game, what happens is, and we just had this big fight with this orc chieftain that was very exciting. But what happened was this orc chieftain was just crushing people, and they were getting kind of like this, and they were kind of around him. And there was this one merchant who, he's terrible with his weapons, but he's good at the healing skill. And he was standing kind of backline, right? These guys were all dead at this point in time, and they were down to the orc chieftain who's parrying everyone, and it knocked people down. So you get knocked to 0, you fall on the ground, and now you're going to be doing the whole death save thing. 3 3 saves and you're like stable, 3 fails and you're dead. If you ever get hit, you take 2 fails, just like 5e. The interesting thing is you can make your rally action, whereas someone can rally you for their action, or you can rally yourself, and what happens is that you get to stand back up. You're still dying, but you stand back up, right? The risk there is that if you ever get hit, it counts as a fail, right? And we had a fight against these wargs that was amazing, because the merchant who couldn't attack, he decided to switch his turn to go ahead of the person who was down. He is very good at persuading, and so he persuaded the person to stand back up, and so he rallied his friend, and then the friend stood up, because movement standing up is like free, or it's half your movement or something. So the guy stands up, he walks over and he kills the warg. It was epic. Like, it was a really cool, like, I think that the player who was playing the merchant felt like they were making a tactical decision, even though they are terrible with it actually attacking, right? So it was very cool. Anyways, one of the things that happens is when you get knocked down, so now you're at 0, right? Well, there's a healing ability in this game, and what happens is that if you have bandages, you can heal someone, right? And so let's go, I'm going to skip around a little bit, and we're going to go to this healing, because I find this interesting, and I'd like to hear what other people think about this, right? Saving life, here. When you have 0 hit points, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so people can see. Oh, I don't think it zooms in. Okay, that's interesting. When you have 0 hit points, another person next to you can save your life with a successful healing roll. Without bandages, they get a bane, and this counts as an action. Multiple attempts are allowed, and if the roll succeeds, you stop making death rolls and recover d6 hit points. You cannot save your own life this way, even if you have rallied. Additional healing rolls have no effect once you are no longer at 0, except when resting. So, what's interesting about this is that you stop, and so I'd be curious what people think about the term stop making death rolls. My interpretation is that they reset, because just like in D&D, once you're back up on your feet, you don't have any death rolls, and then when you get knocked down again, you start back at 0 death rolls, right? So I interpreted that as, yeah, your death roll's clear, because you're now back up. But it was very interesting, because this guy stood back here. He's got like 10 bandages, because that's how many you have. And so in essence, even though I was knocking these people down to 0, he would just get them back up, and they would be at like 5 hit points again, right? And so it felt very weird, right? It felt very, once they were down to the main boss, even though the main boss was a badass, it felt like there was no chance this main boss was ever going to win, because they only got 1 attack. Now, monsters, granted, get multiple attacks. So a monster might be able to do something like they hit you, they knock you down, and then their second, they get another action to move in and attack. And maybe if this person's bodyguards had still been awake, they could have gotten around and messed with this person. But it definitely felt like there was a moment of futility where it was like, all right, this guy's got like a 14 healing, so there's a 70% chance they're going to be able to heal, or 75, whatever it is. And they're going to be successful, and they're just going to keep getting these people back up. So, you know, this fight's pretty much over. That's how it felt. But it was interesting. It was very interesting, and so I'll have to think about that more in terms of how that plays out. And I guess that's just about combat design, to make sure people just can't be in these backlines just bandage healing everyone and keeping them up. The other thing that I thought was really cool that came into this play is the armor. If someone has high armor, then what happens is if you ever attack them and they absorb all the damage, then that damage goes onto your weapon. And your weapon then has to make it, in essence, a chance it could break. And that was really cool, because this person, there was this orc chieftain had like a long spear, which has like durability, like, I don't know, let's take a look. So the durability of a long spear is 9, right? And the weapon, or this person had 9 damage reduction. And there's other ways you can do this. Like if you ever try and parry an attack, and you, whatever the damage is from the parry, the weapon that you're parrying with is going to take that damage, right? And so you have to see like, oh, am I going to parry this? I might break my weapon. So it's very interesting. Anyways, they broke this person's spear, right? So this person had a spear and they broke it and she had to go fisticuffs, which she was still highly capable, and she ended up critting on the rogue and doing like 18 damage. Now, the other thing, this is important, is that to get around that healing concept is you could just be outright killed, because the thing is, if you ever get close to like low hit points, like if you're at 1 hit point, I think that if you ever take damage equal to negative your health, then you're dead, right? So here is this instant death. You don't record negative hit points, but if a single attack reduces your hit points to a negative score equal to your full hit points, your character dies instantly. That might be the case, because I've got a player who's a fighter who has 10 hit points. And so it can be very easy to take them to, say, 2 hit points. And then this orc who's doing 2d8 plus a d6 could easily do 12 damage and kill that person outright. Now, we haven't gotten there yet, and I don't know how the players are going to react to that if that happens, because they're used to 5e, right? And so that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. So that is maybe that's the problem with, if you bandage this person, they get a d6 hit points back. So if you bandage them back up to their feet, and they roll bad and they got 2 hit points, the chances of getting insta-gibbed is now high. So maybe that's the balancing act. Okay. So that's my off the cuff of the combat, and I think that gives you an idea of what's pretty damn cool about this. And what this also made me feel is I really like it. I really like this skill-based combat, and I really like some of these choices. One of the things I don't like about the game so far, that's a strong word, strong take, but I don't think my players enjoy the slow progression of their characters, right? It's not a bad thing, but what I mean by that is they love the skill rolls. So at the end of every session, they're seeing if their skills get better, which they love. But what they aren't sure they like is that they have one heroic ability and they're not getting new ones. And they're seeing some cool ones because they're up against baddies that have them. But they're not getting them. They're not getting these, level up and getting a new feature, level up and get a new ability altogether. And they're not getting those, and so they're not liking that part, right? But I can understand this game, the current heroic abilities that are in this game are super powerful. So if you've got too many of them too quick, you're going to be unstoppable in this combat. So to me, I love that damage is high. Love high damage. Love skill-based combat, meaning like you've got these skill checks that you make and you're pretty good at it. Love the choice for the player to have to evade or parry. Love the armor reduction. Not a fan of the low number of abilities, because it really makes it feel like the character classes don't really matter. Your starting kit really helps, like the dude who has full plate mail as a knight, that helps, that really defines him, but their characteristics aren't like massive. He has the guardian. Now granted, that one heroic ability they have is really cool, but like the merchant guy, his heroic ability is he can tell which direction's more likely like a treasure, right? Which is cool thematically, but in some of these combats, he's definitely he's leaning into all of those help actions and help abilities and healing, which has been cool. It's definitely flavorful. But he wants to get some magic. He's like, there's no magic users in the party, so he's like, I want to learn magic as fast as I can. And so we're trying to weave that in of how he can have a heroic moment to learn magic and get that sort of magic initiate sort of heroic ability. So I'm not a fan of the low number of abilities, but that's okay because I like designing those things anyways. So for me now, I've been using, so this could be a video break right now where hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, see you later. And I'll probably talk about now some of the design things. I might just post this whole thing as one long video. We'll see. Okay. So I've been using ChatGPT. It's been fun. And with ChatGPT, I've been looking at different attributes and abilities. So let's go ahead and pull that up now. Got a bunch of things here. Attributes and abilities. I've also been thinking about action economies, right? So this is the thing I probably might be inspired from the game of Vagabond. So Vagabond has this quick action. I wasn't a huge fan of the name initially, but I get it. I understand what it's trying to do, and I love the concept where, in essence, your quick action can be used any time during a round. It can be used on your turn, on someone else's turn, on an enemy's turn. You've got one around, and you can use it whenever you want to. And then there's a cool like array of things you can do, which is awesome, right? So to me, the idea of having, I called it a tactic action, right? Whereas if you think about a game, let me close these down so you don't get distracted. Stay with me. If you think about a game like Dragonbane, parrying is really good, evasion is really good, but it takes up your entire turn and action for a reason, because it's trying to make it very high decision. Like, this is a big decision. Are you going to evade? Are you going to parry? And combat's fast. And initiative orders are quick, and everything comes out fast. But what if you could have that as a parry or an evasion? And maybe it still takes up your move and action. Maybe this is one of those scenarios where it just absorbs everything. Who knows? But the idea of having this tactic action is kind of cool to me, right? So now you've got your action, you've got your tactic action, and you've got your move. And you could look at some of these Dragonbane actions, some of these Vagabond actions, some of these other actions in other games, shoves, find a weak spot, etc. Find weakness, you learn about the monster. You make it a tactic action, right? Move a friend, and then you tie in abilities to these tactic actions. I kind of like that, so I'm thinking about it. So then I've been thinking about attributes, and I've got this huge list of just cool stuff, right? There's like 78 skills here, but it's the idea of, okay, well, let's think about actions, and let's think about all these different attributes. What are some different interesting attributes that you could have? Yada, 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 yada. And then it starts going into these other sort of like, I've been using ChatGPT to help me wordsmith and get some inspiration. And then I'm going to go through here and sort of like minimize these. But the idea being that I have this setting already that I like, which the setting is this flying island setting with you're going on in essence seafaring adventures, but you're on a boat that happens to be flying in the sky. That's kind of the setting. And so what I looked at was, what if you had these 6 attributes, and the 6 attributes was, one of them's combat, right? I know that's not your traditional like, oh, it's my strength, right? But bear with me. So one of them's your combat skill set, right? And there's 5 things under it. And these kind of look like those roles that I have traditionally, right? Striking is melee attacking, shooting is ranged attacking, defend, maneuver, which is sort of more of like your position, and then counter, etc. Like your ability to maybe like parry or do stuff. This might be controller in essence. Maneuver might be close to leader, right? So this is kind of like giving you an idea of what these might symbolize, right? Then you have your presence, which your presence is your ability to negotiate and talk, intimidate, etc. But what I like about this is you could design the character sheet in these buckets, right? And you could think about what phase of the game are we in? Are we in combat right now? And so you have the combat one to the left. Maybe right next to the combat one you have elementalism, right? Because they are sort of neighbors, right? You might be using some of your elementalism abilities during that. The next column over might be like exploration. And so here is elementalism. I just have some stuff. Here is, I'm just skipping down to exploration. So maybe if you're thinking about these different like categories, you have combat, you have next to that elementalism or exploration, probably elementalism, then exploration. And then next to exploration, maybe you have seafaring, right? Which is this idea of, how do I actually utilize my skill sets on the boat itself? Because that's going to be a big part of the game is when you're on that thing. We already got this one. Then the other aspect of the game might be, and I don't know where knowledge is. I don't know if knowledge is going to make the list, make the cut. Who knows? We'll see. But there's got to be some sort of mental aspect, I think. And so that might make the cut. Stewardship is... This is like... I think of this as another subset of the game, which is like the management of the crew, because you're not going to be potentially the only crew, or maybe you are at first. Like the ship you have is enough for just your party to man, but then later on you get a bigger, like a galley, and you've got crew, right? How are you at doing these different things? And this kind of starts to tie in concepts from, you know, Band of Blades, right? Where it's like you are having to manage the army, okay? And different people might have to get good at different things, but by getting good at these things, you're getting less good at some of these other things, right? Knowledge, I've got to think through that and how it's going to play out. And then the last thing I had was prowess, you know, something along these lines, where these are your actual, like, traditional attributes, but unlike Dragonbane and D&D and every game where your strength determines your melee combat, like, I don't mind them all being separate, right? So maybe your athleticism is your ability to lift things, like it's your strength, but it also maybe defines your extra damage capabilities in melee, but it doesn't necessarily make you a better swordsman, right? And then you have some other things, which I don't know how these are going to tie in yet. I'm just, once again, wordsmithing. And then finally, you have the actual weapons themselves, right? So you you train yourself in the weapons. I don't know how the attributes would work yet, but this means a lot, right? This means you'd have a lot of skills. So if it's like, if you're talking about, let me pull up something over here real quick. If we're talking about, here's Google Sheets. I can't get closer. So it's a pain in the butt here. I'll zoom this in like this. If we're talking about Google Sheets and we've got this thing, then we're talking about, you've got combat, you've got elementalism, you've got exploration, you've got seamanship. Is that what it was? Seafaring? Seafaring? You've got... Maybe I'd put presence here. And then stewardship. And you can see this is already getting to be a lot, right? Knowledge. You'd have to have weapons or... Oops. You'd have to have... insert one column. Not that way. That's fine. Weapons. And then prowess would have to go in here somewhere, right? Probably prowess is in front of this, right? So this could be a lot, right? This might be too much stuff, but if you can think of it in terms of like these three are when I'm in combat, right? So I don't maybe need to look over at the other stuff as much. These two are when we're on the boat, right? These three are maybe when I'm in more RP type scenarios. I don't know. Not necessarily that cut and dry, but if you organize it in a way, it might not be as overwhelming potentially, right? So now you've got, let's go ahead and fill some of these out, right? You've got athleticism. These are not, I repeat, these are not the actual things. These are just placeholder names that might be relevant, right? They don't mean anything. You got athleticism, acrobatics, or maybe that's agility, I don't know. Resilience, willpower. I like having, like, you have complete control over your ability to move, your ability to resist things, etc. And then there's reflexes, but that doesn't really fit in, right? So you got those things. Then you've got combat, which is strike, shoot, defend, maneuver, counter, right? They're all supposed to be action verbs, but they are what they are. And you have your weapons, blades, hammers, axes, knives, spears, bows, guns, I like this idea. You have I put sea weapons, but like the weapons on the ship, right? Ship weapons is probably smarter. Ship weapons, whatever that would actually be. You've got your elemental stuff, so ignite, frost, electric, gale force. These need to have better words. Terraform. You have exploration, which would be scout, survive, investigate, forage / cook, discover. You have navigate, sail, anchor. That one seems a little weird. Repair, board. So this one's suspect. This one's suspect. That needs to be changed. ChatGPT, it helps inspire. That's the goal. Negotiate, deceive, inspire. There you go. Intimidate. Stewardship is recruit, train, resource, trade, organize. I don't know what some of those mean, but and then knowledge is huge, right? Knowledge, it has to be pared down still. Analyze probably doesn't need to happen, but I like the idea. Strategize, adapt, teach, esotericize. It's a fun word. Mythologize. These aren't words, but I like them. And then there was another thing that I thought was interesting where I like the idea of versatility being its own actual thing, right? Now, I don't know what this means. I had a list kind of created at one point in time just to see what it looked like. And it was things like general knowledge, improvisation, jack of all trades. I'm just writing down words. Multitasking. Problem solving doesn't make sense. Quick learning. Sourcefulness. Versatile magic. Versatile weapons. Well-rounded. So these are just words that were kind of associated with it. I just like some of these words. I just like the idea that versatility could be something that you kind of train in a way, right? That you can choose to be, instead of specifically skilled in something, versatile in something. I just realized that I am in the way. Let me make myself smaller here. So I like some of these concepts. Now, these will all be skills. I think that I do roll over because I like the 20 being... it's been interesting in Dragonbane to be rolling, trying to get ones. But I like the 20 being the thing. So maybe we try this out. We try those skills being associated with these. Some of the other things I thought would be fun is that you could have... well, I'll say this one last thing. The one last thing was that I thought dying, because I didn't like the way dying was working in that game, in Dragonbane, that I would probably do more of a, when you go to 0, you now have, in essence, what's going to happen is you're now going to be making rolls to see if you're alive, right? Just like any other game. But in this, whatever your resilience skill is, you're going to roll the first round that you're dying. You roll resilience with advantage, right? If you succeed, you get to keep going. If you fail, you die. The second round, you roll resilience checks straight up. Third round, you roll resilience checks with disadvantage. So it means that death is going to come. It's going to be hard to keep someone up, but maybe you can use, maybe there's some sort of help or healing. You can see healing is not in here, so there'd have to be something, maybe a knowledge. Maybe knowledge ends up being very specific things like healing, right? So healing is a a specific skill, right? I don't know. Or maybe it's under survive. We'll have to see. We'll have to play. I bet it'd be a knowledge thing. You have to heal. It's medicine, right? What was the other thing I was going to say? The other thing I'd say is that I would then build the classes that I designed before. The idea behind those classes, I would build them out where they get specific starting points and different starting skill points in different one of these. Otherwise, you get to choose kind of your own adventure where you want to go. So your background, your class, that might give you points in these things. You're trying to roll over. This is, now granted, this is not to say, I want to make this clear, the pressure system is gone. This is me exploring what I like about game design in general. Like in the games I'm currently playing, the things I really like is how fast those skill checks are. So I'm now, as a creator, trying to say, what does that mean to me? Like, what would that now mean to me if I were going to create a game that was very similar to this? And so that's this. So anyways, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button, hit the like. We'll see where this goes. I have no idea. You know that. And I'll talk to you guys soon.